It's too hard. Why do I have to learn this stuff anyway? My name is Ann Dolin, and I'm your host today. I'm the president and founder of Educational Connections Tutoring and Test Prep. And I started out my career as a Fairfax County public school and as teacher, and on the side, I would drive to kids' homes and tutor them. And I realized over time that that was my calling in life, helping kids one-to-one. So I ended up leaving my teaching job and starting Educational Connections, first as its sole tutor. And now we have lots of tutors that work for us that work with students on a one-to-one basis still in the same way. Although now we don't drive to kids' homes anymore, we're doing everything virtually. And Jan Rowe is our tutor development coordinator. So she not only tutors, but she works with all the tutors to make sure they're up on best practices and works with them to best help their students. So welcome, Jan. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about your background and then we'll get started.
All right. So I was also a classroom teacher. I was in the classroom for 13 years before coming to Educational Connections, mostly middle school math and some elementary. And so now I am full-time with Educational Connections, tutoring one-to-one, and I absolutely love all the families in this area.
Great. Thanks, Jan. Jan, as a teacher and as a tutor, one of the things I heard a lot was, this is too hard. I don't want to do this. Why do I have to know this anyways? And it's one thing we hear from parents over and over is they really feel lots of tension with their kids when their kids are feeling frustrated. So I can't think of a better person than to help us decipher this today than you. So let's go ahead and get started. And as we go, please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A and I'll read them off as we go along. We have a real small group today, so we can easily get to everybody's questions, but you don't have to wait until the end. This is going to run till 1 o'clock, but we'll stop at around 12:45 to go in depth with questions. But again, feel free to populate them into the Q&A feature along the way. All right, Jan.
Okay. So our kids do get a little frustrated when they're working on homework. And so what I like to do today is go through some strategies that I've used, and hopefully this will help you along the way. All right, so I have 4 of the top areas that I see whenever I start working with students that can lead to frustration. First one is whenever the student does not understand how to do the assignment, does not understand what they're doing. Another one is whenever they understand the assignment, but they are putting off getting it done. Also, whenever they are able to get started, but then they get stuck at some point while they're working. And then also whenever students are just feeling overwhelmed by the amount of work that they have. All right, so these are some things that I suggest that you can do ahead of time to help reduce any type of frustration that may occur. So first thing is to have a homework plan. All right, so if you can set up a plan that says when we are going to be able to get homework done and where you're going to be able to get it done during the week, that is going to help quite a bit. Also having home supplies, making sure that you have all the necessary materials that the student's going to be able to use. Make sure they have their pencils and their paper, their graph paper, the calculator, working laptops, things like that. Also, a big one is the websites and the passwords. A lot of kids will use one laptop and they'll have everything set up, but then they may have to use somebody else's laptop in the family and they don't have the passwords or websites set up. So making sure that you have all of those set up on all the devices in the home. And another one that's really important is having a daily to-do list. So before you start, have a time to plan. Plan what you're going to do for homework and have them write down what they need to do or put it on a dry erase board. All the things that they need to do for that homework evening. And then I also recommend doing homework as soon as possible. So right after they get out of school, then if they can have a snack, have a little break, but then start homework immediately, that would be the best case scenario, the best time for them to do it, because they're not as tired. And then also having a homework folder. That would be where they have all the work that they need to do is in one place. And so these are some things that I suggest that could help reduce frustration later on in the evening. Okay, I am going to go through those 4 situations that I do see that can lead to frustration and give you some solutions to help. So the first one is whenever the student doesn't understand the assignment, and you can see that they're starting to get a little bit frustrated. The student might say, I don't get it, never seen this before. And then things that you can say, and the things that I've tried saying with the students is, okay, I understand, and this looks a little bit tricky. Let's look at this together. And it tends to help keep them a little bit more calm, so that we can go through some of these solutions. So with the solutions, I will ask to see if they have their notes, and see if they have any of the steps or the assignment in their student notes. They can also check their textbook, teacher websites. And then there's also, I've had students go ahead and Google the topic to see if they can see some examples of how to do the assignment. And here's where I suggest, if the parent knows how to do the assignment, then if the parent can model that assignment for them and go through it with them, that can help them get to the next step, or at least get to the point where they can talk to the teacher and let them know that they were having some difficulty. Being a classroom teacher, what we are looking for when students are working on their homework is to try and do what they can. And so I would just ask the students to put down or write down what they know, and then I can give them some additional assistance or some notes. Okay? All right, the second situation was whenever a student does understand the assignment, but they're putting it off and they're not doing the assignment. So students will say, oh, I'll get to that later, or it's almost done and I'll work on it later. And so what I'll say to them, or what I suggest that you can say, will be something that says, oh, you know, it's showing that you have confidence that they can get the assignment done. I'm sure you're going to get it done. Let's take a look at it and just see if there's, if we can go ahead and get started, or see if you have some questions. And what I like to do in this situation is just make it really easy to get started. So I'll suggest, let's go ahead and just put your name and put the date and put the title on the paper. And maybe we can, you know, put number 1, and then we can transition to something else and come back to it, but making it really easy to get started. So I had this student, and when I started working with her, she wasn't getting her assignments done. And it was just a couple of, you know, little assignments that she just didn't get done. And I knew that she knew what she had to do, but she wasn't getting them completed. So there was an assignment she had, and it was to write about bears. And so what I thought, okay, well, I'm going to sit down with her, and I'm going to tell her that I'm going to do the assignment like she would do the assignment. And so as I was her study buddy. And so we sat down, and I said, what I'd like to do is set this timer. And I have a little picture of a timer that you can also get. And so I said, we're going to set it for 5 minutes. And we're just going to do this for 5 minutes. And we're going to write everything that we know about bears. And I'm going to do it along with you. And so I set the timer, and I started writing. And I looked over, and she wasn't doing anything. She was just looking at me. And I said, okay, do you need some help? And she's like, I don't know anything about bears. And so I said, okay, so then this is what I would do if I didn't know anything about the topic. And so sometimes whenever students, they do know what they need to get done, but they're putting it off because there's some piece they might be missing. So what I like to do in this situation is I like to model these assignments. And so what I mean by modeling it is I tell them, and I go through and tell them what I'm thinking at the time when I'm doing the assignment. So for example, this one with the bears, she didn't know anything about bears. She knew how to do the assignment, but didn't know anything about bears. So I tell her, okay, if I don't know about the topic, I'm going to Google the topic. I'm going to go through and look at things about bears, and then that's going to help me get started. Once we did that, then the next assignment, she was able to go through those steps, what we modeled together, so that she could do it. And so that will help also the kids that are procrastinating. All right, so the third one is when you have a child that is stuck. They have gotten started, but they have gotten stuck along the way. The student will say, this is so confusing. What do I do now? I don't know how to continue. And so as a tutor, as a parent, you can say, I can see why this is confusing. Can you show me what your last step was? And so what I also explain to the kids during this part is I say, okay, let's think about when you're on a bicycle and you get stuck at some point. What do? Well, we tend to back up a little bit, and then you move forward a little bit slower, and then you can continue going. Same with your assignments. So when you get stuck, then what I ask them to do is I just ask them to back up a little bit. Let's back up to the last step that you felt that you understood and that you were successful. And then what we can do is we can move ahead slowly. And I want to look for maybe missing steps or some missing instructions, so that can help me move along the way. And then again, this is where I like to model next steps for them, to help them get over that little hump. And then the next time they will remember those little pieces. Right? I also like to have them write down the steps that they may have had trouble with at this point. So then the next time they have this trouble, then they can refer to their notes and move forward a little bit slowly. All right, and then the fourth situation that I had on there was when your child feels overwhelmed. All right, so a student might say, I'm never going to get this done. I'm going to fail. And they just start feeling so overwhelmed by the amount of work they have. And what I like to say is I recognize that they're working really hard, but I want to see if I can help them prioritize and look at their assignments to see what I can do to help out. And so what I suggest in these situations is making sure that you have a plan. And so I want to share with you another story that I have, or little situation that I have with a student. And he's a swimmer, a high school swimmer, and very dedicated to swimming. And he swims in the morning, really early in the morning, and he also swims in the afternoons. So he swims probably 4 to 5 hours a day. And he was getting so overloaded with his work, and he was starting to feel so overwhelmed with the amount of work because it was starting to pile up. And so when we sat down together, the first thing we needed to do was come up with a plan and see what his schedule looks like. And so we sat down and figured out when he had time to do homework on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and the weekends, and then how much time he had. And when he did that, he realized he didn't have any time on Tuesdays at all. He barely had enough time to sleep. So what he decided to do was he was going to be proactive, get those assignments on Friday so that he could work a little bit over the weekend on them, so that he wouldn't feel so overwhelmed because of his schedule during the week. So having a plan ahead of time can help them feel less overwhelmed and hopefully less frustrated at that point. And then prioritizing the assignments. And then I also, whenever a student starts to feel overwhelmed, making sure that they have all their supplies, materials, make sure they have adequate space, and eliminating as much of the distractions as possible. And then the other one is making sure that they have 3 to 5 minute breaks here and there while they're working. Okay, so communicating with when they're angry. So we do see this with students. They tend to get really upset and can get themselves rather angry whenever they're working on some assignments. And when that happens, the emotion center in the brain is starting to light up. And when that happens, it's very difficult for the students to move forward. And so the best thing that you can do is just disengage at that point for a few minutes, depending on the level of frustration that they are in. And so I also remind them of the breathing techniques of in through the nose and out through the mouth, and doing it as slowly as they possibly can. I'll also say things like, I can see that this is a little bit difficult. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and when you're ready, just let me know so that we can start. And then I also try where we transition to another strategy or to another topic if I can at the time. So it's going to depend on their level of frustration at what I'm going to do. So I have a student and he gets extremely upset whenever he's working on math assignments. And so we have this situation occur, and what we decided to do is come up with a plan. So whenever he is feeling frustrated or starting to get to that level of anger, we wanted to discuss this ahead of time whenever he is calm, and say, okay, so these are the things that we've noticed that happen whenever you're doing this, this, and this. So let's come up with a plan on what we're going to do when this happens. And so we decided that we were going to take those couple of minutes. We can even set a timer. And then we can transition to another subject to work on. And then also some of the kids like to, at the end, like maybe after their 5-7 minute time period, maybe take a 2-minute funny video break, watch a little funny video, and then that usually lightens the mood. And then we were able to transition to another topic, or maybe go back to the same topic, just depending on the level of frustration that they had. Now I also, during this period of time, want to help them go back to previous materials that they had worked on, or the previous assignment before the end of the night. So I definitely want to go back to it if I possibly can. All right, so we have moving past the meltdown period of time. So when a student has been really upset or frustrated about assignment, and you've given them the period of time to calm down, then what I like to do at that point is ask them to show me what they know, or take me back to the place where they knew what they were doing before they were frustrated. And then when we get to that point, then in order for them to go to the next step is I'll say, okay, maybe we can look for some similar examples. We can look through the textbook. We can also look through your teacher websites, but trying to get the student to tell me, or your child to tell me, how we can proceed, what we can do. If they are having trouble with that, then I'm going to model that piece for them as much as I can. I don't want to do the work for them, but I do want to model for them what I would do in that situation. And then just you being there just gives them that support that they need to get to the next step. Okay, now I have homework approach by subject. And this is some suggestions by subject that can help hopefully lessen frustration and hopefully keep frustration from happening. And so I have found whenever I work with some students on these particular subjects, these are some things that we've tried that will help out. So math, what tends to help kids the most is having step-by-step instructions. If they can have those step-by-step instructions at some point, if they need them, that's going to help them if they get to a point where they're getting a little frustrated with the assignment. So I will make sure, even if they know how to do it, I'll make sure that we have that available, or we have access to those steps. All right. Also, drawing pictures is always a fun way to do that, and doodling does help quite a bit. All right, so we also have language arts. Now, the language arts, like my example that I had earlier, this tends to be an area that can cause a little bit of frustration if the student is procrastinating or having difficulty with writing. So what I suggest to them with language arts is just get started with the easiest part of the assignment. Just go ahead and put your name on the paper and the date, and then just put words on paper. Let's just do sloppy copies. Just get something started with language arts. And that tends to help with, I went ahead and got started, and then they can keep coming back to it later and not having to get everything done at the last minute, but just taking it in steps. And so that's where I put breaking apart assignments, because that tends to be an area that will cause a little bit of frustration. All right, and then science and social studies with students, if they are having a little bit of trouble with those subjects, I tell them to focus on those vocabulary words and knowing the definitions of the vocabulary words. If they can focus on that, then that tends to help them with answering the questions and understanding the material. And again, drawing pictures. Science and social studies are great subjects also because they have wonderful videos that you can watch for those topics. I have them over here on the side so that you can take a look at them if you haven't seen some of them before. Brain Pop, you do have to pay for some of those videos on Brain Pop, but Brain Pop is really good for math and language arts, and it will go through the steps, and it also gives you examples of how to write. And then you have science and social studies. Science, it's the Amoeba Sisters, and they do a great job explaining the topics in science in the crash course. So if you see your child getting a little frustrated, they may want to take, you may want to take just a couple minutes to go and look at one of these videos, and that might help clear some of the confusion up. Okay. Right. Okay, and inspiring motivation. All right, so whenever students are having a hard time, just being motivated to get their work done because they might feel frustrated whenever they're doing their work, and they don't want to encounter that. These are some things that I've suggested with students that have been successful. And so one of them that's really popular is having a study buddy. That tends to help quite a bit with kids. Because of our situation with COVID right now, they are doing the online study buddies, but that does help out quite a bit because they can talk to each other, they can, and then it also gives them that sense of accountability and working with somebody and making sure that they're getting assignments done. So that tends to be really popular for motivating kids to do some of the assignments. Also the rewards, and I have a lot of parents that will ask me about rewards, and rewards is part of our habit formation, and it really does help having a reward system set up. This is something that you can set up with your child. I do like to suggest the rewards that the child has discussed with the parent and coming up with the reward system together. And that tends to really help them work towards something and a reward. All right, also being able to set time limits. A lot of kids will think, okay, I have to do my homework. How long do I have to do it for? If you can set a time limit and maybe do the time timer, that will help motivate them also because they know this is, okay, I'm only doing this for 30 minutes. Or I'm only doing this for 45 minutes, and they have the little timer setting there. And so that helps motivate them knowing that it's a limited amount of time that they're going to be doing that homework. And then I absolutely love 5-minute breaks, where I can do, a lot of my kids like to do the funny videos, where we take a little 3 to 5 minute break just to kind of lighten the mood. And that tends to motivate them quite a bit to get started or to work towards looking at one of those one of those little funny videos. And then also playing games. And then the last one I'll mention is changing location has been quite a great motivator for kids. Sometimes whenever families are able to set up a location that might be more personal, or just changing the environment, can also help motivate to get your assignments done. All right, so I'm hoping some of those strategies will also help you and your child be less frustrated whenever they're doing their homework. All right, and so
Great. Thanks, Jan. That was really terrific. What is the most, I'm just curious, what is the most common thing you see with your students when it comes to frustration? What's the most common behavior? And then I'd love to talk about strategies for tackling it.
Oh, okay. So the most common is whenever they know that they know what to do, but then whenever they're sitting down to do the assignment, they forget how to do it. And that's what I usually see, how frustrated they get, very frustrated with not being able to get that assignment done. And so the strategies that I've used with that particular situation is going back over maybe their notes, going back over, maybe opening up the teacher website to see if we have it there. But the main thing I'm trying to do is show them how to do it on their own and be independent, and how they can work through that feeling of frustration when they're starting to feel that. And the more that I can do that with them, the more that I can model those ways to do it, helps them the next time and the next time.
That makes complete sense, Jan. I see that a lot with kids, and also talking to their parents, is that the kids will be stuck and the parent will say, well, this is how you do it. Let me show you. And the kid says, well, that's not how Mrs. Anderson said to do it. And then, the parent's like, well, this is how I learned to do it, and this is how you're going to do it. And it just never ends up well. So I love that strategy of asking, oh, does your teacher have this information online? Or do you have any notes on that? To your point, getting them to try to figure it out so that they can go back to that strategy on their own is so important. My next question is about what is it going to be like in the fall? Because I have to think that not only are we going to be dealing with frustration when kids are supposed to be doing online school, but also some boredom, especially when the teacher says everybody has to be on mute or turn your videos off. And then there's just not a lot of social interaction. How have you dealt with that with kids in the spring? And what are your strategies for helping them to be more focused online?
Okay, so this is definitely a question that quite a few parents have asked, and actually a lot of kids have asked the same thing, trying to stay focused whenever they are online. What I have suggested to some of my kids that they tried at the end of the last year was they have their notepad next to them, and they are actively engaged, taking notes or writing down things that they're hearing that the teacher's saying. I've also tried to make it a little bit more fun for them, so where it's more of like a doodle pad, things like that. And so they draw these cool little, I said, okay, so let's set it up with colored pencils, and then I want you to set up like little sections and then draw that out. And then whenever you're seeing that you're having a little bit of a hard time with focusing, sometimes doodling will help you quite a bit. Listen in to what's going on online, and then you're still able to take the notes, and just drawing little pictures or about what is going on. So that really helped my kids be able to stay focused last year. And a lot of them, they're not like, they don't draw these portraits and things like that. It's just their own little pictures, and they couldn't wait to share that with me. They're like, oh, look, and I could read them perfectly. So I think drawing the pictures and having like a little doodle pad will help quite a bit, and and try that strategy. And then a lot of kids too would come up with other things that would help them stay a little more focused, things like that, like printing things off the internet, and then they still did their own doodles on that. So hopefully a couple of those will help.
I read a study on doodling and I found it to be fascinating because when I was a teacher and I saw kids doodling in my class, I would tell them not to do it and pay attention. But actually that was completely the wrong approach. This study looked at doodlers and non-doodlers and what information they retained. And they found that actually the doodlers retained more information than the non-doodlers, maybe to your point that they're not passive listeners. They had a pencil in hand, and anytime you have that visual motor integration of learning something and spitting it out with a pencil and paper, whether you're writing down notes or even you're just drawing the diagram, the picture, or doing something on your own, you're still a little bit more attentive than just the hearing component of it. So I love that idea of making sure kids have pencil and paper handy. I wonder if it also prevents them from that natural inclination to go to their phone and be looking stuff up when they should be online and focused. So that makes complete
absolutely
sense.
Agree with you. I had a student, and he was in a classroom where the teachers did not want them to do anything but listen to the teacher, and he was having such a hard time even focusing because he would keep daydreaming. And so we worked with the teacher, and she agreed to let him draw and sketch, and changed his whole world. And so I became a huge believer in the doodle at that time. And he, was listening better. He was picking up the information. He recalled so much more from it. And it was just from sketching. So definitely a huge fan of doing the doodles. And it's definitely worked out with, like I said, for the kids that I worked with last year. And they were able to stay and keep their attention on the online classes.
That's great, Jan. Thanks for sharing that. A couple of weeks ago, we had a guest, Cliff Sussman, MD, on this webinar series, and he is an expert. He's probably one of the most nationally known experts on video game addiction. And we were actually talking about homework and focus, and he said, make sure where the kids do their homework or where they're online for their virtual learning, it is not in the same room they game. And he said, and to the best of your ability, let them give them a different computer if that's possible. I know that's not always possible, but he said that it's taking an alcoholic into a bar. It's really hard for them to resist the temptation. So if they're in the room doing online learning, and it's the place where they're also gaming, it's hard for them to split their focus and to focus on what they're doing in school rather than thinking about their video games. And he says, same with it being the same laptop. And I thought that was fascinating because I always thought, like you said, switching up the location is super helpful. But if you have a child who's really on video games a lot, or, they're super distracted by that, putting them in a space to do their learning is great because it's kind of like a separate place, and your brain thinks, this is my virtual learning place for school and not my gaming place.
Yes.
So
Fantastic.
I just kind of wonder if this fall will present a whole new set of challenges for us all.
Right. Well, I do have families that are, trying to be proactive, just exactly what we were talking about. And they're trying to set up a space that this is going to be the school space. And this is where we're going to have our launching pad, where you're going to have all of your things before school that you're going to put it right here. And this will be where you do your work, so that they can have a defined space for school. So you get up and you're going through the same routine, and then you go to school. And this is where you go to school every day. So we are, I am working with families to get that set up so that they have that type of setup whenever school does start next year with the virtual school.
I love that idea. Thanks, Jan.
Yeah.
Any other questions from our audience that they would like to ask? And if not, I'll ask you, Jan, another question. So I'm wondering, and I'll wait to see if anybody else posts something, but I am wondering, when you think of virtual learning, what do you think is going to be the kids' biggest hang up? And how have you started talking to parents about that, or how would you address that?
So, well, based on last year, it was difficult for kids to actually know everything that they needed to get done. I think that was very difficult for them if they didn't have, whenever you are in school and you have a teacher saying these are the things you have to get done, that it's more of a verbal, and they know that's, what they have to get done. Well, online, a lot of the kids I was working with were having a very difficult time being able to go through what is suggested work, what is required work, things like that. So, and I think, and that was something that was difficult for parents also to say, okay, I don't know what they really have to get done. So I think this year, depending on what the school is going to do and how they're going to have it set up, that's going to be something I'm going to work with the parents right away at the beginning, is being able to go through the information and making sure that we know what is going to be their classwork online and what is going to be their homework, and making sure that we have a schedule set up. Can I say one other thing that I saw last year too? Okay. Yeah. The other thing was, because it was a little bit inconsistent, that was hard for families also. So it looks like they're going to have a consistent schedule this year. And what I recommended and what I saw were families that were more successful is when they kept a school schedule. So they kept their kids getting up at the same time they would get up for going to school. They had breakfast. Then they went and if they didn't have their online classes yet, then they did work at that time. And then they got on, but they had it set up for an entire school day. And so they didn't waver from that. And so I felt that the families that were able to keep that schedule were more successful.
That's great, Jan, and that makes complete sense. Kids thrive on schedules. They do best with routines. And even older kids, I found, as you know, my kids are older now. My youngest son is 18, and when he was going through this as a senior in the spring, it was tough because every day was a little bit different with his schedule. But having that set time to get up and to take a shower in the morning, to do those basic things, I found really did help him to feel like there was more structure. So that structure can pay off for kids. We have a mom or a dad who said, along the lines of paying attention to online learning, what's your advice for high energy, fidgety kids? And I, just kind of piggybacking, Jan, on what you said about giving kids something to do. There's actually a lot of research about fidgety kids, and our natural inclination as parents and educators is to say, if they're, touching something or twirling their hair or spinning in their seat or whatever they're doing, we'll say, stop that, put that down, don't touch that, just focus. But actually, fidgety kids crave sensory stimulation, and their bodies respond best when they actually have something to hold, because that pressure of that thing helps them to calm down. And so it's fine to give kids little fidget toys, or to Jan's point, give them a notepad and a pencil or a pen. One of the products you showed last week that I love, Jan, was that erasable highlighter, which is so cool. And I love that product. And so those things would be really great for fidgety kids to have in hand, even if they're doodling, like we said, while they're doing online learning. And that's going to help them more than saying, you can't touch anything or just focus. But I'm sure, Jan, you have some other ideas for fidgety kids.
Right. I'm going to talk on your point. I've had kids that are very fidgety, and the doodlers, they get the highlighters, and they have some textured highlighters that have, they have all kinds of ridges on them, and the kids like that. And then they can use those as their doodles, because they can color with their highlighters, and they can still write in the highlighted sections with the colored highlighters. So kids tend to do really well with those. I also have recommended whenever kids have the fidget, if they need to stand up or be in an area where they can sit down, stand up. It depends on like if they can move the laptop. So maybe one, if they're having a hard time sitting for too much time, which because it will be a lot of sitting, they can get to where they're raised up a little bit and they can stand and kind of move around a little bit. But also, you know, anything that they can hold or they can move around in their hands has always been helpful too. So those are a couple of things that I've suggested.
Great, thank you, Jan. And thank you so much for being our guest today and sharing with us the things that you use to help kids. It's so important. And some of the things that you were saying actually remind me more of executive functioning coaching and less of like subject tutoring, but helping kids to have a plan, to know what they have to do, to prioritize. Those are skills that I think are probably I don't think, but I know are super important when kids do not have the natural structure of being in a classroom. So as parents, I think our role is going to be different this year. Instead of helping with subjects, it's probably going to be more about, let's talk about what you have coming up, helping them to plan out their day and their priorities. So Jan, thank you so much for joining us. And it was great to see everybody. And I hope that I will see you next week. This is a weekly series going until the end of August. And Jan, what's our subject next week?
Study skills.
Awesome.
Study
Great.
skills. Yeah, study skills next week. And then we have transition to school the following week. So
awesome. And that's going to be so different this year than it was last year. That's for sure. So thank you all again.
Okay.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.